Hey folks, it's Stefan, back again with another episode of the Gamer's Companion to Music. We're back in the Destiny universe for the final time before the release of Destiny 2 in the fall, talking about the Year 3 expansion, Rise of Iron. This expansion has a couple of contrasting yet complementary themes going on in the story, and that idea plays its way into the music nicely, creating some good variety as you play through the story and the raid. The music brings us back into the Year 1 feeling of orchestral wonder, while adding some really cool new influences not yet seen in the Destiny universe. Guardian, let's take a look at the fantastic music in Rise of Iron, while I fight off the urge to do my best Lord Saladin impression. Rise of Iron was composed by mostly the same composers as The Taken King. We've got Michael Salvatore, Sky Lewin, C. Paul Johnson, and Rotem Moav, with an awesome addition by Misha Mansour that I'll talk about a little bit later. My sense from listening to interviews and such is that Johnson writes a lot of the techno-electronic music, and Sky and Michael work on the orchestra, chorus, and live percussion. I can't confirm this for sure, but I have some confidence in the accuracy of that statement. Each year, the title screen for Destiny changes. In Year 1, it just said Destiny and played vanilla Destiny music. In Year 2, it played an Oryx-themed piece. In Rise of Iron, the game starts up like this. And then with the Triumph update, Destiny returned back to its vanilla title screen. It literally brought a tear to my eye and filled me with warmth and nostalgia as I thought back to my life 1,300 hours ago spanned over 3 years, to the first few times I booted up the game and fell in love. The title screen set the mood in Destiny right from the start, and I don't think it should be understated how much of an impact that can have. Rise of Iron's story has a few themes to it that influence the music. First, there's the rise of the Guardian to the ascendant title of Iron Lord. This is often associated with heroic choral and orchestral music in the score. The next is the feeling of loss and remembrance that Saladin is clearly feeling toward his fallen comrades, also shown mostly by the chorus in the music. The third is the SIVA corruption, manifested through the Devil Splicers. This music draws on some percussion, electronic, and even metal influences to convey this musically. All of these are evidenced in the main motifs I'm going to point out about the music. If you've watched the previous episodes on Year 1 and Year 2, I've talked about the motifs that have been included in Destiny so far. Let's quickly run through all the motifs we've talked about, because they're quoted briefly at times in Rise of Iron. In Year 1, we hear the main Destiny themes. We've got the Destiny Horn Call, the Tritone Melody, the choral motif, and the Crota bass blast. In The Taken King, we talked about the Oryx fanfare, and the bass motif. Rise of Iron adds to this lengthy list, but creates its own sense of space in the Destiny universe. The first I'd like to point out is the main theme of Rise of Iron, so I'm just going to call it the Iron Song. The achievement is called Sing the Iron Song after all. It comes back and back over and over again in Rise of Iron. Here's just one iteration of it. makes the music sound solemn and heroic is actually the harmonic motion. The chords are all moving together. There's no tension or dissonance in the harmonic structure, and that creates a very open feeling for the listener. Hearing the chorus join in during a few iterations of this theme also helps to add to that feeling. Seriously though, you hear this everywhere in so many different ways. Just listen. This is the glue that ties the expansion together musically, and it interacts in a really cool way against the next motif at times. So the enemy is SIVA. Saladin will constantly remind you that it's not the Fallen, not the Devil Splicers, but SIVA itself. Regardless, SIVA seems to take on its own theme, and it kind of takes the first few notes of the Iron Song motif and alters it to fit its own use. At least that's the way I hear it. I'm calling this one the SIVA Motif. You're listening for the big strong chords in the low brass. What it does is outline the same chord as the Iron Song motif, which is a simple minor chord. And then the next time it happens, you hear more dissonance as it changes from a minor chord to a diminished chord. This happens a lot. This SIVA motif is the glue that ties all the different raid encounters together. The last main huge motif I'm just calling Elegy. During the story, you see Saladin really struggle with his failure that resulted in the loss of most of the other Iron Lords. This comes to fruition musically in the choral and strings only piece, Elegy. This motif works its way into other elements of the score as the others do. It's titled very well because an elegy is defined as a poem of serious reflection, typically a lament for the dead. It also does a lot of the same things that the Halo Reach song New Alexandria does from my last GCM Extra. Here is Elegy. It is a significantly beautiful song, and chorus and strings together create such a reflective and powerful combination. This piece by itself is one of the shining stars in this soundtrack. The music embodies the literal fight between the Guardian and SIVA, which I think is a really cool thing. It also almost completely takes the electronic feel we heard in the Taken King expansion and does away with it. The composers are so good at adapting to what the game and the story dictate. Honestly, a lot of really heavy electronic beats might not have been the best idea for most of Rise of Iron. The expansion is not totally devoid of them, however. Take a listen to the music from the Wretched Eye strike, for example, where the music becomes very hectic and very electronic. It's out of style compared to most of the other pieces, but for the moment it's scored for, it works out well in my opinion. Hey, remember the Tritone Shift? I'm always talking about music that shifts between two chords a tritone away, and I've named it the Tritone Shift because, well, that's easier to say every time. This is something I've discussed before a lot in games like Banjo-Kazooie and Halo Reach, and even Destiny at times. Coincidentally, Michael Salvatori also worked on Halo, and it seems that the Tritone Shift is something that's a part of his compositional voice. In Elegy, we hear this full on. It's very powerful, especially as the music gets louder when the chords actually shift and then get softer afterwards. In general, shying away from tension in music makes it sound more like a mistake, while embracing that tension creates a stunning and powerful effect. Take a listen from Elegy. The chorus plays a huge role, and not just in the slow music. There are two examples I'd like to specifically illustrate. One is from the Iron Tomb mission, and one is a piece that plays sometimes when you're out in the Archon's Forge, which is Rise of Iron's version of the Court of Oryx, out in the Plaguelands. In Iron Tomb, the final main story mission of the expansion, you're fighting SIVA-fied versions of the Iron Lords, and the battle is epic as hell. The chorus will be interjecting and singing phrases in Latin that I can't really decipher or understand, but they also literally sing the word SIVA. If done incorrectly, something like that can sound really corny, but in this case it adds so much to the power of the music. The song really builds in a great way too, using the main Rise of Iron theme to a clear climax where the accompaniment changes to a very short, choppy, and intense style underneath those choral SIVA chants. It then goes into the SIVA Motif directly afterwards. The music is literally playing SIVA against the Guardian. It is so cool, listen to more. This is another clear, shining star in my opinion. When in the Archon's Forge, a few different pieces of music can play. One of those is the second half of the soundtrack song called Forged in Fire. Here, the chorus plays a similar role as in the previous track. It also includes a previously unnamed minor motif that most people absolutely love from the Axis Phase 2 fight in the raid. I'm going to cover that independently, so if you love the raid music, I am almost there. One thing this specific piece does, though, that is really freaking awesome, is takes a triple feel and strategically injects one measure at a time of 4 notes over a 3-beat feel. This iteration is a more developed form of what is called a hemiola, where the music shifts between a 3-beat triple feel and a 2-beat duple feel. It's taking the 2-beat feel and just adding 2 extra notes. You can clearly hear the change because it's accented so well into the percussion. Oh yeah, and it's also doing this underneath the Elegy Motif, but it's used so damn powerfully. There's a lot going on, so just sit back and take a listen. In an interview, Salvatore said that they came up with the Iron Song melody very early on in the process. I had a theory for a while that they came up with the raid music first, but it turns out that probably was not the case. In any way, the raid music from Wrath of the Machine specifically ties that SIVA motif through all of the different encounters, whether it be Vosik, the Siege Engine, or Axis. If you haven't played the raid but you have listened to the soundtrack, the music is coded in there, because you won't really know what the Archpriest is or what the Siege Engine is unless you play the raid. I'm a little bit disappointed they didn't put the Axis fight music in there, but there have been some amazing people who have recut the music to be accurate. There are a lot of incorrect versions out there, because a lot of the music is used in the soundtrack song Eyes Up. However, in the Axis fight, there is a very clear indicator of whether or not it's the raid music. Hint hint, it's that SIVA motif. The Vosik fight is more straightforward in terms of the music. We hear the SIVA motif and at times a little bit of the new Axis motif, which sounds like this. We also hear a bit of that main Destiny music scattered in there too. The Siege Engine for me is where things get real. First off, there's a raid cutscene, and then this big machine starts coming towards you. The thing about the music here is that it adds mechanical sound effects into the percussion, and adds in electric guitars and drum set to drive home that mechanical feeling. This is all happening under statements of the SIVA motif in the low brass. This one took me by surprise when I first played the raid. I found myself jamming out to the music and dying instead of trying to get up on the damn Siege Engine. It's got some clear rock and metal influence, which fits this encounter so well. I love this one. The last is the Axis fight music. This one starts off with high strings and some sick French horn riffs. It's super tense by doing this. Then the low brass kicks in with that SIVA motif, and it just builds from there. We get this very tense and forward-moving music through most of the fight. Then after you're done your damage phase, the real magic happens. As Axis is calling upon the power of SIVA and you're frantically running back to your safe platform, the music completely shifts and we hear a relatively new motif, the Axis motif, and it's epic. So here's the fight music itself. And then here's the incredibly popular Axis motif. Alright, last but certainly not least is probably the coolest addition to the Destiny soundscape, if you ask me. One of the things that Rise of Iron was trying to do was bring back some old strikes from year one. They worked Sepiks Perfected into the story, and one of your main goals was to hunt him down, so you got this SIVA-fied version of the Sepiks Prime Strike called Sepiks Perfected. The Sepiks Prime fight music was by far one of the best pieces of music in Destiny's Year 1. In a very similar vein to the Siege Engine raid encounter, they literally put a metal cover of the Sepiks Prime fight music into the game itself. It was done by Bulb, or Misha Mansour of the band Periphery. The cover is sick. It fits the mechanical nature of SIVA and Sepiks really well, and it brings an entirely new flavor into the game. I mean, it kinda helps that my own two personal favorite bands are Avenged Sevenfold and Metallica, so this is right up my alley. Here's original Sepiks Prime. Here's the cover called Sepiks Redux. And here's a little bit of both of them at the same time I put together. So sick. Destiny's yearly events are also something to look forward to, so I was very happy to hear 2 new tracks for the winter event called The Dawning. It's just so pretty. As you watch my videos on Destiny, remember I'm extremely biased. Destiny is by far my favorite game franchise and my favorite game universe, so I'm guilty of looking at the game and sometimes the music with some God of War colored glasses at times. It's a shader joke, get it? I think I can safely say, however, that Rise of Iron rose the bar for music in Destiny's world. I absolutely love the music in Rise of Iron, more so than vanilla Destiny and The Taken King. I'm not knocking those one bit, but Rise of Iron really spoke to all of my personal influences and loves as a musician. So I really love this music, and I hope that you do too. That's gonna do it for this episode of the Gamer's Companion to Music. Stay tuned in the future. We're looking into doing some Gamer's Companion to Music streams and maybe even setting up a Discord, so look out for those in the coming months. We are so glad you joined me today, and I hope you'll share us around if you enjoyed it. As always, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time. If you'd like, you can catch up on years 1 and 2 of Destiny's music or take a look at one of our Destiny long plays.